A couple of things. Our press policy, right? Very simple. Everything is on the record. If you would like to be the first on the record about what's going on in this room, our Twitter hashtag is Global Forum. And if you don't know what a Twitter hashtag is, you don't need to worry about it, all right? Now, to get us going, I want to hand the mic to Rick Stengel, who is the editor of Time magazine. Just as important as that credential here today is that Rick also collaborated with Nelson Mandela in writing his book, Long Walk to Freedom, and Rick has just written another book called Mandela's Way that you have all received. Please welcome Rick Stengel.
Sir. Hello, everybody. Now, I am delighted, have a seat, gentlemen, to be with two of the giants of this great continent. And we are going to have a discussion about the theme that is animating this whole conference, which is the emerging opportunities in Africa and around the world. The gentleman to my right, Mo Ibrahim, is someone that I would use a word that's often, it's overused and become a cliche, but for some people it is still true. He's a visionary, and he's a visionary in two respects. Very early on, when he got his doctorate in England in mobile communications, he understood the power of communications and the power of cellular service and how that could help not only the world, but his continent that he loves, Africa. When he formed his cell phone company, there were only 6 or 7 million cell phones in Africa. When he sold that company, Celtel, in 2005, there were 100 million. And what he realized is that cellular service could actually unite a continent that otherwise could not always be united. The second part of his great vision was when he sold his company, he created the Ibrahim Foundation and the Ibrahim Prize, which was basically, and I don't know if you know about this, it really is extraordinary and unique in world history. It is a prize given to African leaders for their service so that when they leave office, they have something that actually looks after them, so that they don't have to leave office in the way that many African leaders have left in the past, who might have been despots, and they created wealth for themselves. This is rewarding democracy, rewarding good governance, and in fact, the rest of the foundation is really dedicated to creating good governance in Africa, and we'll talk a little bit more about that. The gentleman to my far right is Cyril Ramaphosa, who is the chairman of the Shanduka Group, but I'm going to talk a little bit about how I know him as one of the people that historians will look back on as one of the true founders of modern democratic South Africa. When I first started coming here in the 1980s, there was a fiery, charismatic, bearded head of the National Union of Mine Workers who was fighting not only for the men in that union, but fighting for freedom, fighting for honest wages, and really fighting against apartheid. Cyril was that person, and he exhibited incredible bravery, incredible courage, and incredible vision. Now, when the man I think of as Graça Machel's husband came out of prison, Cyril was there right by his side. And one of the things that Mandela did was he deputized Cyril to basically lead the constitutional negotiations. You know, in America, where we have a constitution that's over 200 years old, there are 39 framers. Basically, there's one great framer of the South African Constitution, and that is Cyril Ramaphosa. And in my work with Mandela, one of the things that I always realize, and this is where I embarrass Cyril every time, is that no matter what decision he was taking in that incredibly critical period leading up to elections, where it was a very fraught period, he would check with many people, but then he would say, now I must check with Cyril. And that is my slogan too, because I think we always need to check with Cyril about everything. And as a great tycoon in democratic South Africa, he has basically helped ensure black economic empowerment, and he has been the Secretary General of the ANC and has been a force in good governance here in South Africa. So welcome, gentlemen.
Thank you. Thank you.
So let me ask the first question, and it's something I know that is on everybody's mind. What is the significance of the World Cup, both for Africa in general and South Africa in particular? We'll start with you, Mo.
It is a wonderful opportunity, really. First, for Africa to be able to stage the really infrastructure. The Cup is a huge event. To have the stadiums, the roads, all the hotel space, the transport, etc., is a major investment. And many people doubted and the ability of Africa to stage such a wonderful cup. But I think, like everybody, we see it has gone so well, and it really mapped Africa. What's also good is that the media coverage you're getting in Africa. The problem with the media is that is either the news, and we have like 30 seconds in any news bulletin, and by the time we cover Darfur and our brother Mugabe and Somalia pirates, your time is up, and that's Africa. So all your American Europeans know about Africa is Mugabe and Bashir and Somalia. Or Christmas time, our good friends in Oxfam show you all those starving kids and poor mothers, etc. So your idea about Africa is quite really tilted and a little bit far from reality. This is a normal place like any other place. It's peaceful, it's wonderful. And I was last night in the hotel and everybody said, Mo, what is wonderful? What is this? Oh, this is Cape Town. This is so wonderful. I said, what do you guys think? Africa is a wonderful place. So the Cup is a good opportunity to showcase Africa to the rest of the population. You know, we don't have genocide everywhere and starving people. Our people are very healthy. You know, you notice in the Olympics, and we run faster, we jump higher, we play better football. I mean, we are healthy people. Thanks.
Well, thank you. This World Cup event is, for us as South Africans, is very humbling. And it's a great honor to have been given this unbelievable opportunity to host this event. We see it as an African event, and that's how we depict it, that this is an event for Africa. And in many ways, it is also meant to deal with the pessimism that people, particularly in the North, have had of Africa not being able to do anything meaningful, to manage whatever. But for us as South Africans, it's also been an opportunity to unite our nation. It's fostering national cohesion for us. And we've had 3 other major events in our country that have also revolved around one person's name. The one event that brought the nation together was when Nelson Mandela was released 20 years ago. That united the oppressed people of our country, and through that event they could smell, sense, and touch freedom. The elections of 1994 was another major event that united the South African nation. And then we had the Rugby World Cup. That was another event which has now been clearly demonstrated in the film called Invictus. And in all these 3, Nelson Mandela was the central figure. This World Cup is also a tribute to him, because he led, in many ways, our effort in hosting this World Cup. And the national cohesion aspect of this World Cup really revolves around his unbelievable efforts to unite the South African nation, a nation that was at war with each other, but he brought it together when he was released, the elections, and today we can celebrate the work that Nelson Mandela started many years ago. And Graça Marcel is here, his wife, and I think through her we would like, and I'm sure you will all join me, to say thank you to Nelson Mandela for having brought us to where we are. And I could safely say, without embarrassing Mama Michelle there, that we would not be hosting this World Cup so successfully if Nelson Mandela had not kick-started this process of building this new South Africa, but more importantly, of also projecting the African continent to the world. For today, through this forum and through this World Cup, Africa is being projected as a continent where good things can come from.
Good.
But there is a fourth event you forgot, Cyril. We also beat France. Very important.
France is in the old world, right?
Well, actually, it's funny because I couldn't find out which team was which because all the French players were African anyway.
Be kind,
Cyril,
be kind.
you touched on one of Madiba's great ideas, which was that sport can be a vehicle for cohesion and bringing people together, not only in South Africa, but in the rest of Africa. And you kind of stole my second question, Mo, because you talked about some of the perceptions of Africa. President Zuma talked about the misconceptions of Africa and how folks in the West don't realize, as Jeff originally said, that the developing world is growing faster than the developed world, that foreign investment in South Africa is now on the order of $60 billion, and it was only about $5 billion 15 years ago. What is it? Let's talk about the positive side. What are, for potential investors, for people in the West, what's the success story of Africa? And can Africa be brought to have more cohesion among the different countries itself?
Absolutely. Let me start by telling you the best kept secret. You know, business people, I assume everybody is business people. I tell you something very, very important you don't know. The highest return on investment anywhere in the world throughout this decade has been in Africa. Do you know that? The highest return of investment. You guys don't want to make money? It's strange, you know, people piling on real estate investment in America and all the stupid things here and there, and people forget, you want to make money here. Here is the best return. When we did cellular service, the average return to our investor was 150%. 8.5 times we return money, average money, for an average period of investment of 3 years, in average. 8.5 times return. Where do you get this kind of return? So the best return on investment here in Africa, unfortunately, is a secret. Merrill Lynch published a report about, I think, the last frontier a couple of years ago. And some very nice, interesting statement leaps out. They said, if you compare an African company with an Indian company, same market cap, you'll find that the Indian company is covered 15 times more by research reports than the African company. If it's a Chinese company, it is covered 12 times more than the African company. So you guys don't know what's going in Africa because our companies are not covered. Our business, there is no research reports. When there is no light, there is no knowledge, people don't invest. So unfortunately, the lack of information about Africa is really hampering the effort to invest in Africa. But this is a wonderful place to really make money. We have 1 billion people hungry for everything.
Now,
everything.
Now, Africa, of course, is often compared to China and India. And in fact, I think in 2000...
But you only make more money here than China and India.
Well,
that's the difference. And people don't realize that. Tell me anybody made money in China.
Okay.
Yeah.
Well, let's see why that is. I mean, because some people say, look, Africa will have more young people and more labor by 2030 than either India or China. But for example, labor costs here tend to be higher. Is that in part because of the successful job that you did a long time ago in unionizing people in South Africa? I'm kidding a little bit, but foreign investments and foreign investors are looking at the cost structure in Africa. So what is the story that you need to tell them about why investments should continue?
Well, I think looking at the labor costs is just really one aspect. And the problem with many people is that they tend to focus too much attention on that. Yes, the labor costs tend to be higher, but there are a whole lot of other areas of investment that yield a much better return, as Mo is saying, than you will find in other countries like even China or India. Africa is definitely on the move, and I'm associated with just 2 companies that have made enormous money in Africa, notwithstanding the higher labor costs that have been part of the investment story. And if you look at the opportunity itself, what it yields in terms of returns, and you look at the climate that is being engendered on the African continent, that Africa is transforming and transforming on an ongoing basis. The governance is improving exponentially, and Mo's index testifies to that. And the leadership in Africa that is coming to the fore, it's a new generation of leaders that's focusing more and more on creating a climate that's conducive for investments to happen, a climate that's conducive for people in Africa to have a better life. So if you put the whole sum total of all that, you'll find that this is a continent where investments should still happen and where you can still make a really good return. And many who have been brave enough to invest in the African continent have made quite a lot of money. And 2 companies I'm associated with have done so.
Okay.
Yes.
1 mobile company and 1 bank.
So let's talk about one of the biggest investors in Africa, and that's China. China's investment in Africa is enormous. I think one of the things that people don't realize is that China has actually been involved with Africa since the 1970s. Even when China was much poorer than it is now, it gave more aid to more countries in the late 70s than the US did. But a lot of people look at China's investment here as extractive. They're looking for commodities. They're not really investing for the long term. Are they a model of how people should invest in Africa, or are they in some ways something that we should be trying to escape from?
I really think you touched on a very important subject. I think really we need to have a balanced view about China investment. Let's start with, as an African people, we absolutely welcome China involvement here. They have been really a great partner. They're investing a lot of money here, and it's wonderful. Welcome them. But at the same time, China should start from where the West ended, not from where the West started, because we have a checkered history with the West in Africa, and things have changed a lot. So there is a need, I think, for more transparency in the process of investment in Africa. And unfortunately, in some occasions, that is not the case. We really need transparency, what these deals are about, who is getting what for, these deals in Congo, et cetera, et cetera. Also, China, as it is continue to discover Africa, really need to build bridges more and more with the African people. Mm-hmm. There's a lot of visits by the Chinese leaderships to African leadership, but that is not the basis of friendship between people. Not a prime minister meets a prime minister in a closed room, and then they write a check for $1 billion to do. We need more transparency. We need people to know each other. Chinese need to get more involved with civil society here, etc. That is important. This is a lasting friendship. Friendship with some dodgy presidents who are here today, gone tomorrow. It doesn't work for China interest. For long term, China need to really talk to us. We are the people in Africa, and to make sure whatever is doing here is doing really for African people, and that will be the basis of a lasting friendship. We welcome China, and we hope that they will not repeat the mistakes of some of their Western counterparts.
So,
my own take is, I'm often intrigued by the concerns and the fears that people in the West have about China's involvement on the African continent. And I found that China's intervention on the African continent is slightly different from what has traditionally been experienced by many African countries, companies and countries from the West. In China's case, many countries have found that you can talk to them, you can raise your concerns, and they are easy to adapt. I think we should be clear that China works for China, Inc. Those are the interests they're trying to promote. But in the course of doing all that, if you are able to engage them in a meaningful way, you could also actually get China to assist you or assist a country in developing your own country. And certainly that has happened in a number of countries on the African continent where they have invested money to extract raw materials. They've often been quite willing to loan money to certain countries to develop infrastructure, to develop a whole range of other things. So there is a very good and positive mixture that I think one can extract out of China's intervention in various countries. We shouldn't just fear China for what it stands for. And certainly in a few companies that I'm involved in, I found them to be people who you can talk to. They are tough, they're really serious business people, but at the same time, you can also achieve your own objectives.
And you touch on something that is one of the misconceptions, I think, about trade in Africa, is that about 50% of international trade with Africa is so-called South-to-South transactions between developing countries and Africa, which is something very different than it was 20 years ago. You both touched on leadership in Africa, and this is the second year in a row that the Ibrahim Prize was not given to an African leader. I had the pleasure of talking to Mrs. Michel beforehand about this, and Trevor Manuel said to me, you know, Mo is the one who gets blamed, but in fact the committee are the people responsible for not giving the prize. What kind of message, though, does that send when the prize is not given to an African leader? It's something that you started to reward good governance, transparency, democracy, and people are looking to Africa to change and as a model, and then suddenly they think, well, why didn't they give the prize to somebody?
Well, thank you for clarifying that. I'm not a member of the prize committee, okay. So I have no voice or vote or anything there. Actually, I have two members who have Grasa, and I believe Mary Robinson is hiding somewhere here. Yes. You ask these two ladies. I mean, they are the member of the committee. I'm not a member. But I always face the music at the end. Anyway, fair enough. The point is that the prize is for exceptional leadership. And it is given for leaders who come to power, democratically, of course, really done something which transformed their country to take it forward. At the end of their period, they raise their hand, thank you, and left the office. So that is the premise of the prize. So it is for exceptional leadership. It's not just enough to come and do any, yes, okay, you did not steal money, you did not kill people, but that's what is expected anyway. It is for exceptional leadership. Look at the people who won the prizes. We had Chissano. What Chissano did is ended civil war. These internal armed conflicts are really is what killing us in Africa. Is damaging, is hindering progress, etc. And what he did there, if Bashir did in Darfur, see how many lives would have been saved, how much progress the country would have made. He extended his hand, transformed his country, then put in place democratic transformation, liberalizes the economy. This is total transformation of a country. Look at President Mogai, who won 2 years ago. Botswana is a wonderful success story. We saw how a country, a small, poor African country, with huge percentage of HIV suffering, and how the resources, natural resources of this country, was really deployed for the benefit of the people. And you end up with a country now which is is no longer a poor country. It's a mid-income countries. And we say that is a wonderful example of how people can use the resources for the benefit of the people. How somebody like Bukhari at the forefront of the fight against HIV, transparency, international, that is a wonderful thing. Then the husband of Grasa, I don't need to speak about her husband. Everybody knows what Mandela did. Transformation of this kind. This is what the people look for. The BBC people asked me 2 weeks ago when we announced their decision, this means there is no good leaders in Africa. And I said, excuse me, you Europeans, let's assume I started a foundation here in Europe. I put you in charge of the committee. Tell me the European leader you will give this prize to for this year or last year. And they just looked at amusement. Just name one European leader, exceptional European leader, who came of office having transformed the changes. So we understand that not every year we'll have a leader who come out, and so that's understandable. But what's important, if you read our index, as Cyril said, we always have to refer to Cyril, of course, you see the state of governance in Africa is improving. We measure 80 parameters. So as far as governance is concerned, we're moving forward. We're doing much better. But every 2 or 3 years, we'll get a wonderful leader. And it's not a question of saving money, because we declared the money which should have been to president, we're giving to fellowships, African fellowships, etc. So I'm not saving any money.
And every year, by the way, Mo's Foundation publishes an index of countries in Africa on how they're doing on governance, good governance, transparency, and the like. But so let me talk to you about leadership, because you were in that generation, and the leader of that generation, really the kind of post-Mandela, post-Ravonia generation of leadership. Leaders who came to the fore within the country, who were not exiles, and you were a model for that for the future. How do you engender that next generation after you, not only in Africa, but in South Africa? Because men who and women who might someday actually win Mo's Prize. How do you do that, particularly at a time where, and you had in South Africa, where you had 2 generations that basically lost their educational experience during the struggle, and elsewhere in Africa are struggling to educate those people too. How do you generate a new generation of leadership?
I'm not disheartened by Mo Ibrahim's foundation not awarding a prize for 2 years running, because there's quite a lot of progress that's being made on the African continent. And we often, in a flippant way, say there's a new generation of leaders and so on. In fact, it is true. There are a new generation of leaders at various levels, both in the public sector, in the private sector. More and more of the leaders of tomorrow are well educated today. They're highly steeped knowledge-wise in what is the right things to do. There are levels of consciousness about doing the right things, about following the indicators that Mo's Foundation tracks and follows. Is extremely high. They're high on governance, they're high on accountability, they're high on improving the lives of ordinary people, on delivering, and all those wonderful things, on democracy. And if you look at the African continent now, we're having more and more regular elections. Political parties that have been in power have been pushed aside in some countries, and new parties have come in to improve governance. And all that is a wonderful, virtuous cycle that is just going round the African continent. There are only a few countries where things may seem to be going south, or in the wrong direction. So in years to come, I see Mo's, Ibrahim's foundation awarding more and more African leaders this award, and I support his foundation's work, and there are many other sort of organizations that track wonderful indicators of progress and governance. And all that is adding up to this wonderful progress that we are recording. The growth of our economies on the African continent are partly as a result of the progress in governance, progress in accountability in various countries. So all those things are being supported by these great political freedoms that people are winning and achieving on an ongoing basis. We've got a much freer press on the African continent than we did before. And all those things are wonderful, positive additions to building a really good and strong foundation for good governance, good political management, and economic management on the African continent. So Africa, in many ways, is on the move economically and in terms of governance and politically as well.
You know, we only have a minute left, according to the clock that I'm looking at here. Do you each want to take a couple of seconds to mention some examples or some leaders that you think are doing a particularly good job, so people could know, okay, here's a highlight. Is it Mr. Museveni? Is it Ethiopia? Give us a couple of very quick examples.
I'm usually outspoken, but my board will kill me if I touch this subject because of the rise. I'm barred for commenting on performance of individual presidents. What is important is Africa really, as Cyril said, is really changing. Please believe me, Africa is moving forward. The rise of civil society, my hero is the civil society. The African civil society is just rising and flourishing. And look, actually what we're doing, we are welcomed everywhere in Africa. We go, our foundation, we're with people, we are tolerated, etc. There's no example like that of a political foundation in Europe or in America, which is really taking issue with the governments and still being welcomed or not hounded or not in prison or anything.
It would be unfair to highlight just one leader or two leaders on the African continent. I think the important thing that we should focus on is that we are all learning from each other. As one country progresses exponentially, all other countries look at that country introspectively and learn. We as South Africans are learning from other countries, and they are also learning from us. And I'm hoping that one of the other countries on the African continent will host the World Cup, and they will have learned a lot from what we have done. So it's a wonderful process that's underway.
I will be biased and highlight two leaders that are not only representative but inspiring, not only in Africa but the rest of the world. These two gentlemen here, Ibrahim, Cyril Ramaphosa. Thank you so much for joining us today.
Thank you. Thank you.
It's very kind.
Thank you so much.
And I'm going to welcome back Jeff to the stage for the next event. Thank you so much.
Thank you.
Okay.